The whimpers echoed through the cavernous marble halls of the Orion Royal Palace. Guards with curved spears stood rigid, uncertain how to handle the small blue figure huddled against the massive crystalline window overlooking the frozen tundra beyond. Princess Eliara, daughter of Queen Lysara, ruler of the northern territories of Orion, was lost in another episode. Her white hair splayed wildly around her face as she rocked back and forth, fingers pressed against her ears to block out the sounds only she could hear. "Stand back," commanded Advisor Mervyn, his own azure skin darkening with frustration. "The royal physicians will handle this. Remember what happened to the last servant who approached her during an episode." The guards exchanged knowing glances. The last attendant who had tried to comfort the princess during one of her sensory crises had been banished to the outer wastes. Queen Lysara tolerated no failures when it came to her daughter, even as she kept herself distant from the child who could not bear the sensory overwhelm of royal life. Caer Viron paused in his work, setting down the broken heating conduit he'd been repairing. As a human technician contracted from the Earth Coalition outpost, he was tolerated in the palace only for his exceptional skills with the ancient technology that kept the palace habitable in Orion's brutal climate. 6 months into his year-long contract, he had become nearly invisible to the royal court, just another outsider performing necessary labor. But the child's distress cut through his practiced detachment. Before he could reconsider, Caer set his tools aside and approached the small gathering. "What do you think you're doing, human?" Mervyn's hand moved to the ceremonial blade at his waist. Ceremonial, but no less deadly. "I can help," Caer said simply, his voice low and steady. "I worked with neurodivergent children on the frontier colonies before becoming a technician." "This is the royal heir, not some human colony brat," Mervyn sneered. But something in Caer's calm confidence gave the advisor pause. The princess's episodes had been increasing in frequency and intensity as she approached her 7th cycle. The court whispered that she would never be fit to rule, creating a dangerous power vacuum in a world where strength was everything. "If you upset her further, your contract ends today, along with your residence permit," Mervyn finally said, stepping slightly aside. Caer nodded, understanding the implied threat of being cast out into Orion's merciless wilderness. He approached slowly, then knelt 3 paces from the distressed child, making himself smaller, non-threatening. "Hello, princess," he said softly, not reaching for her, not insisting on eye contact. "My name is Caer. The sounds are too much right now, aren't they?" The girl's rocking slowed fractionally, the barest acknowledgement. From his pocket, Caer withdrew a small device he'd crafted during the long, dark Orionian nights when sleep eluded him. Homesickness had driven him to create something from his childhood on Earth, a bubble maker, but adapted using local materials. The transparent solution inside contained microscopic particles from the palace's luminescent fountains. "I'm going to show you something," and he continued in that same gentle tone. "You can watch or not watch. It's your choice." He raised the device to his lips and blew softly. A stream of iridescent bubbles emerged, capturing the pale light from the windows. They floated gently upward, their surfaces reflecting rainbow patterns across the marble floor. Princess Eliara's head tilted slightly, her fingers loosened from their tight press against her ears. One bubble drifted near her, and she watched it, transfixed, as it hovered before gently popping with a soft, musical note. Caer blew more bubbles, each one catching the light differently. Slowly, the princess's breathing steadied. Her hands came down completely, and she reached hesitantly toward a cluster of bubbles floating nearby. "They like you," Caer said, continuing to create more. "They're dancers from the sky. They've traveled very far to perform for you." A sound escaped the princess, not a whimper of distress, but something close to wonder. She touched one bubble with a single blue finger, watching it burst with a tiny spark of light. Her lips parted in what might have been the ghost of a smile. None of them noticed the tall figure watching from the shadowed archway. Queen Lysara stood motionless, her ceremonial armor glinting dully in the dim light, her expression unreadable as she observed the human technician connecting with her daughter in a way no one had managed in years. "You approached the royal heir without permission." Queen Lysara's voice was like the ice fields beyond the palace walls, smooth, cold, and concealing deadly depths. Care stood before the throne, acutely aware of the guards positioned at each exit. The throne room of Orion's northern palace was designed to intimidate, with towering columns of blue-veined marble and a floor that dropped away at the edges into misty depths. The queen herself was equally imposing, tall even for an Orionian, with the characteristic blue skin of her people deepened to almost indigo by royal lineage. Her white hair was pulled back in elaborate braids interwoven with shards of ice crystal that never melted, a symbol of her unwavering rule. "I saw a child in distress, Your Majesty," Care replied, meeting her gaze despite protocol dictating otherwise. "Where I come from, helping a child transcends rank. Where you come from is not here," she responded, leaning forward slightly. "On Orion, approaching royalty without permission is punishable by exile. Do you understand what exile means on a planet where the night temperatures drop below what your human physiology can survive?" Care knew precisely what it meant. He had treated enough frostbite cases among the human outpost workers to understand Orion's merciless climate. "I understand, Your Majesty. And yet you interfered." "I helped," he corrected, then hastily added, "Your Majesty." A dangerous silence fell. Advisor Mervan, standing at the Queen's right hand, smiled thinly, clearly anticipating the order of banishment. "You were a teacher before becoming a technician," the Queen said finally, surprising Care with her knowledge of his background. "You worked with children who experienced the world differently." "Yes, Your Majesty. On the frontier colonies, resources were limited. Those of us with any specialized knowledge took on multiple roles." Queen Lysara rose from her throne and descended the 7 steps to stand before him. Up close, he could see the fine lines around her eyes, evidence of worries that her regal bearing otherwise concealed. "The royal physicians have no explanation for my daughter's condition," she said, her voice lowered so only he could hear. "They call it star-touched and speak of omens and portents. Useless superstition. On Earth, we would describe her as having sensory processing differences," Care said carefully. "Her brain experiences inputs, sounds, lights, textures, more intensely than others. It can be overwhelming. Can it be cured?" "It's not an illness, Your Majesty. It's a different way of experiencing the world. With proper support, those differences can become strengths." The Queen studied him with penetrating, violet eyes. "How did you know to use the bubbles?" "I didn't know they would work specifically," Care admitted, "but many children with sensory differences respond to visual patterns that are both predictable and variable, like bubbles or falling snow. They provide a focusing point when everything else becomes too much." Lysara turned abruptly, pacing several steps away before facing him again. "The court believes my daughter is unfit to rule, that her differences make her weak." Her voice hardened. "I have executed 3 advisors for suggesting I set her aside and produce another heir." Care swallowed, suddenly understanding the dangerous currents he had waded into. Royal succession on Orion was evidently more than a family matter. It was planetary politics with deadly stakes. "Advisor Mervin has suggested I punish you severely as a warning to others who might overstep," the Queen continued, her gaze flicking to the advisor who straightened importantly. "But I am more interested in results than warnings." She returned to her throne but did not sit. "You will continue your work as a technician, but each day you will spend 2 hours with my daughter. You will document what works and what doesn't. You will teach my royal physicians your methods." Mervyn stepped forward, his face darkening. "Your Majesty, allowing a human such access to the princess is unprecedented. The Council of Elders." "The Council of Elders has provided no solutions," Lysara cut him off. "And I am still queen." She fixed her gaze on Kair again. "Understand this, human. If you help my daughter, your future on Orion is secure. If you fail, or if you ever use this access to harm her—" She left the threat unfinished. "I understand, Your Majesty," Kair said with a bow. As he was escorted from the throne room, Kair caught the venomous glare from Advisor Mervyn. He had just been thrust into Orionian court politics, a game with rules he barely understood and consequences he couldn't afford. The princess's chambers were unlike anything Kair had expected. Rather than the opulence typical of the palace, Eliara's rooms were almost austere. The lighting was dim and indirect, the furnishings minimal. Most striking was the ceiling, a perfect replica of Orion's night sky, complete with slowly moving constellations. She finds the stars calming, explained Tala, the princess's caretaker, an older Orionian woman with kind eyes that contrasted with her formal manner. On good days, she can name every constellation. Aliara sat in a corner, arranging small blue stones in precise patterns. She gave no indication she had noticed Kair's arrival. Has she spoken today? Kair asked quietly. Tala shook her head. The princess has not spoken in nearly a full cycle. She communicates through the pattern tablets when necessary. She gestured to a set of tablets with symbols engraved on them. I'll need some materials, Kair said, watching the princess carefully. Nothing elaborate, just things with different textures, some musical instruments that produce gentle tones, drawing implements. The queen has authorized whatever you require, Tala replied, though her tone suggested skepticism. Over the next several days, Kair established a routine. He would enter quietly, set up various stations around the room, one with different textured fabrics, another with simple musical instruments, a third with drawing materials, and then simply sit, working on small projects of his own. He made no demands of Eliara, asked no questions, but narrated gently what he was doing. Today I'm fixing a small motion sensor, he would say, working with his tools. These tiny gears need to align perfectly. It reminds me of the stone patterns you create. At first, Eliara ignored him completely. By the fourth day, he noticed her watching from the corner of her eye. By the sixth, she had moved her stone pattern work closer to where he sat. On the eighth day, she approached his bubble-making device, which he had left on a small table. Would you like to try it? He asked, keeping his voice neutral, offering no pressure. To his surprise, she picked it up and examined it carefully, turning it over in her small blue hands. Then she put it to her lips and blew gently. A single perfect bubble emerged, catching the starlight from the ceiling and refracting it in dancing patterns. Beautiful, Kair said simply. Beautiful, Eliara echoed, so softly he almost missed it. Tala gasped from across the room, the first word the princess had spoken in nearly a year. She speaks to you. Queen Lysara's statement held a complex mixture of emotions as she and Kair walked through the royal gardens, a rare luxury on Orion, sustained by ancient environmental technology. Not often, Kair clarified, and usually not directly, but yes, occasionally. Why you and not others? Kair considered the question carefully. I make no demands of her, Your Majesty. I don't require eye contact or responses. Much of Orionian court communication seems to be based on precise protocols and responses. That's exactly what overwhelms her. The Queen frowned. These protocols have sustained our civilization through centuries of survival on this harsh world. They cannot simply be abandoned. Not abandoned, Kair suggested, but perhaps adapted. Princess Eliara perceives the world differently, but that perception could offer unique insights. Different isn't lesser. The court does not share your view, Lysara said grimly. Advisor Mervyn grows bolder in his suggestions that Eliara is unfit to rule. He has begun cultivating support among the provincial lords. Kair had noticed the increasing tension in the palace. More guards, more whispered conversations that stopped when he approached. What happens if they decide she cannot be heir? Civil war, Lysara said bluntly. I have no other children. If Eliara is set aside, the provincial lords will tear the kingdom apart competing for the throne. Thousands will die in the fighting, and even more from exposure and starvation if the central authority collapses. Orion is too harsh a world to serve without unity. The weight of the situation settled on Kair's shoulders. This was no longer about helping one child. It was about planetary stability. There is more, Lysara continued, stopping beside a rare flowering plant. The outer territories have reported increased attacks from the Vrax. Kair had heard whispers of the Vrax, nomadic predators that roamed Orion's vast wilderness. Larger than humans, with 6 limbs and thermal vision perfectly adapted to hunting in Orion's frequent blizzards, they were the planet's apex predators. The old treaties are failing, the Queen explained. For generations, we have maintained an uneasy peace with the Vrax packs. But 3 outposts have been overrun in the past month. If civil war comes, the Vrax will sense our weakness and attack from the periphery while we fight amongst ourselves. What can I do? Kair asked. Continue your work with my daughter, Lysara said. But understand the stakes have risen. I need Eliara to demonstrate enough capability to silence the doubters. We have perhaps 3 months before the Council of Elders convenes to evaluate her fitness. As they turned back toward the palace, Kair noticed Advisor Mervyn watching them from a high window, his expression calculating. What Kair couldn't see was what happened after he and the Queen parted ways. Advisor Mervyn slipped from his observation post and moved through a series of little-used corridors to a secluded chamber deep within the palace's east wing. 4 figures awaited him there. Provincial Lords Drubek, Soran, Talus, and Nerea, the most influential members of the Council of Elders after the Queen herself. The human grows more influential by the day, Mervyn reported, his voice tight with controlled rage. The Queen walks with him openly now, discussing matters of state. Is he truly just a technician? Asked Lord Drubek, the eldest of the group, his once vibrant blue skin now faded to a pale azure with age. His background checks confirmed his credentials, Mervyn admitted, but I suspect there's more. Perhaps he's a human intelligence operative, seeking to gain influence over Orion through the royal line. Lady Nerea, the only female provincial lord, made a dismissive gesture. Paranoia doesn't suit you, Mervyn. The humans have shown no interest in our governance, only our minerals in trade routes. Then why else would he insert himself into royal affairs, Mervyn challenged, a lowly technician suddenly becoming the princess's caretaker? The timing is suspicious, especially with the Vrax becoming more aggressive. Lord Tellus, commander of Orion's southern defense forces, leaned forward. Speaking of the Vrax, your contacts have confirmed they'll cooperate? Mervyn nodded. For the right price. They care nothing for our politics, only territory and technology. I've promised them access to the outpost in the Frost Basin once we've secured control. Dealing with the Vrax is dangerous, Lord Sauron warned. They're unpredictable, savage. They're a means to an end, Mervyn countered. We need a crisis significant enough to justify emergency measures. The Vrax will provide that distraction while we secure the palace and convince the Queen to step aside. And if she refuses? Lady Nerea asked the question they'd all avoided. Mervyn's expression hardened. Then we must be prepared to act decisively for the good of Orion. The princess is unfit. Anyone who has witnessed her episodes knows this. If Lysara cannot see past her maternal instincts, she too is unfit. A heavy silence fell over the group. What Mervyn was suggesting bordered on treason, yet none voiced objection. The future of Orion, they believed, hung in the balance. The human must be dealt with first, Lord Drubek finally said. Remove him, and the Queen loses her newfound confidence about the princess's condition. I've already begun arrangements, Mervyn assured them. There are many dangers for an off-worlder on Orion. Accidents happen, particularly to those who wander into restricted areas. Lord Tellus nodded grimly. Make it clean. No evidence connecting to the court. Of course, Mervyn agreed. Now let us discuss the details of our contingency plans. The Vrax won't wait forever, and neither can we. As they bent their heads together over a holographic map of the palace, none noticed the small maintenance duct near the ceiling, nor the palace servant who had paused there during routine work, overhearing their treasonous plotting. Over the following weeks, Kair's sessions with Princess Eliara showed steady progress. She began to speak more frequently, though still rarely in the presence of others. Her episodes of overwhelming sensory distress became less frequent and less intense. Kair documented everything meticulously, teaching the royal physicians in Tala the techniques that seemed most effective. He created a daily schedule with clear visual representations, giving Eliara the predictability she craved. He designed tools to help her communicate her needs when words failed her. Most importantly, he helped the palace staff understand that her differences weren't failures to be corrected, but simply a different way of experiencing the world. The bubbles help me think, Eliara told him one day as they sat beneath the star ceiling. When everything is too loud and too bright and too much, the bubbles give me one thing to follow. That's why I made them for you, Kair explained. They give your mind a path through the storm. Mother never understood the storms, Eliara said, her small blue fingers arranging her stones in intricate patterns. She thought I was being difficult. Your mother loves you very much, Kair said carefully. Sometimes people don't understand what they haven't experienced. The man with the sharp voice wants to send me away, Eliara said suddenly, referring to Advisor Mervyn. I heard him telling the others, I'm broken. Kair felt a chill at the princess's perceptiveness. You're not broken, Eliara. Your mind works differently, and that can be a great strength. How can it be a strength when it makes everyone angry? Different perspectives see solutions others might miss, Care explained. Your attention to patterns, your sensitivity to changes others might overlook. These can be powerful tools for a ruler. The princess considered this, her head tilted in the gesture Care had come to recognize as deep thought. Will you teach me how to make it a strength? I'll try, he promised. But first, we need to help others understand you better. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Tala answered it, spoke briefly with someone outside, then turned to Care with a concerned expression. There's a maintenance emergency in the East Wing Environmental Systems. They're requesting your expertise immediately. Care frowned. He wasn't scheduled for regular maintenance duties during his sessions with the princess. Can it wait until... They were quite insistent, Tala interrupted, her eyes conveying a warning Kair couldn't interpret. Said something about potential cascade failures affecting multiple sectors. I'll come back as soon as I want, Care promised Eliara, who had already returned to her stone patterns, seemingly unbothered by the interruption. He followed Tala into the corridor, where she immediately pulled him into a small alcove, checking that they were alone before speaking. There is no maintenance emergency, she whispered urgently. I received a warning from Merrick, one of the kitchen staff. He overheard Advisor Mervyn meeting with several provincial lords. They're planning something against the Queen and Princess, and you're their first target. Care's blood ran cold. Why would Merrick risk telling you this? His younger sister has the same condition as the princess. He's seen how you've helped Eliara and believes in what you're doing. Tala glanced nervously down the corridor. You need to speak with the Queen immediately, but carefully. Mervyn has eyes everywhere. How do I reach her without drawing attention? The Royal Meditation Garden. The Queen goes there alone each day at sunset. Few know of this routine. Tala pressed a small access chip into his palm. This will grant you entry through the service corridors. Now go, I'll create a diversion about the false maintenance call. The Royal Meditation Garden was a small, enclosed space nestled within the palace's central dome. Unlike the grand public gardens, this was a private sanctuary with living plants from Orion's rare temperate zones. Care slipped in through a service entrance, heart pounding as he committed what would normally be an executable offense, entering the Queen's private space uninvited. Queen Lysara stood with her back to him, facing a small pool where luminescent aquatic creatures created patterns of light beneath the surface. I wondered when you would come, she said without turning. The walls have been whispering for days. Care froze. You knew? That Mervyn plots against me? Of course. She turned then, her regal features set in grim lines. That he plans to eliminate you as well. That I learned only this morning. Your Majesty, Tala received word that Mervyn has allied with several provincial lords and plans to use the Vrax to create a crisis. She finished for him. Yes, I know. The question is not what they plan, but when and how they will strike. We need to get you and the princess to safety, Keir urged, and abandon the throne? Give Mervyn exactly what he wants? The Queen shook her head. Oh, no, running would only confirm their claims about my fitness to rule and Eliara's capability as heir. Then what do we do? We prepare a counterstrike, Lysara said, a dangerous edge entering her voice. But first we need evidence of Mervyn's treachery that will convince the neutral provincial lords. Accusations without proof will only strengthen his position. The servant who overheard them would be dismissed as unreliable or coerced. We need irrefutable evidence of his dealings with the Vrax, something that cannot be explained away. Kair considered the problem. The communication device Eliara mentioned seeing. If Mervyn is coordinating with the Vrax, he must have some way of contacting them that wouldn't appear in the palace communication logs. Precisely. The Queen's violet eyes glinted with approval. And for that, I need someone who can move through the palace without raising suspicion. Someone with a reason to access restricted areas. Someone like a maintenance technician. Kair understood immediately. You want me to find the Devane? Can you do it without being caught? Mervyn will be watching you now. I can, Kair said with more confidence than he felt. But I'll need help creating a diversion. You shall have it. Queen Lysara moved closer, lowering her voice further. Tomorrow at midday, there will be an incident in the main power distribution hub. Nothing dangerous, but enough to require all senior technical staff. Use that opportunity to search Mervyn's quarters. If you find evidence, bring it directly to me, to no one else. Trust no one we haven't discussed. As Kair turned to leave, the queen added, "And Kair, be careful. My daughter has grown attached to you. I would not see her lose another person she cares for." The next day unfolded according to plan. Almost. The diversion at the power hub occurred precisely at midday, drawing technical staff from throughout the palace. Kair was summoned but managed to slip away in the confusion, making his way to advisor Mervin's private quarters in the West Wing. The security measures were sophisticated but focused primarily on keeping people out, not on detecting those with legitimate access credentials. As a technical contractor, Kair had been granted certain override capabilities for emergencies, capabilities he now used to bypass the door locks. Mervin's quarters were austere and meticulously organized, reflecting the advisor's controlled personality. Kair searched methodically, conscious of the limited time available. The main rooms revealed nothing suspicious, but a small study adjacent to the bedroom held promise. A desk dominated the space, its surface bare except for a formal writing set. Kair examined it carefully, looking for hidden compartments or secret mechanisms. Nothing. The bookshelf contained historical texts and technical manuals, impressive for show, but revealing nothing. Time was running short. Soon the power hub situation would be resolved, and Mervin might return. Kair was about to admit defeat when he noticed something odd about the room's lighting fixture, a slight asymmetry in its mounting. Standing on the desk, he reached up and felt around the fixture's edge, discovering a small depression that, when pressed, caused a panel in the ceiling to slide open. From the hidden compartment, Kair retrieved a small device unlike any standard Orionian technology. Its design was crude but effective, clearly adapted to interface between Orionian and Vrax communication systems. Beside it lay a data crystal that potentially contained records of the communications. He had just pocketed both items when he heard voices approaching in the corridor outside. There was no time to replace the ceiling panel. Kair dropped silently from the desk and pressed himself into the shadow behind the door just as it slid open. "Need to accelerate the timeline," Mervin was saying as he entered, accompanied by Lord Tellus. "The human's influence grows daily. Rushing increases risk," Tellus countered. "The Vrax leader Grakthar demands more concessions before committing his warriors. We've already promised them the Frost Basin outpost," Mervin snapped. "They now want the weapon caches at the northern perimeter as well." Mervin swore, moving further into the room toward his desk. "Greedy savages. But fine, whatever it takes. The attack must happen before the Council of Elders convenes." Tellus was about to respond when he stopped, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the room. Something's not right. Kair held his breath, pressing deeper into the shadow. Mervin followed Tellus's gaze upward to the exposed ceiling compartment. His face darkened with rage. "We've been compromised." Tellus drew a ceremonial blade from his belt, searched the room. "Whoever did this can't have gone far." Kair knew discovery was inevitable. He had only seconds to decide on a course of action. Fighting two Orionian nobles would mean certain death, even if he somehow prevailed. Surrender would mean torture to determine what he'd learned and who he'd told. A third option presented itself as his technical knowledge of the palace systems came to his aid. Each private suite had an environmental emergency override, a fail-safe from the early colonization days when atmosphere containment was less reliable. As Tellus approached his hiding spot, Kair lunged for the environmental control panel near the door, slamming his palm against the emergency purge button. Instantly, alarms blared, and warning lights flashed as the room's atmospheric system initiated decontamination protocols. Standard procedure called for evacuating the affected space immediately. In the momentary confusion, Kair bolted past the startled nobles and into the corridor. Behind him, he heard Mervin's enraged shout, "Stop him! The human has the device!" Palace security would be alerted by the environmental alarm. Kair had minutes at most before the entire palace would be searching for him. He couldn't risk going directly to the queen now. He'd lead Mervin's forces straight to her. Instead, he made a split-second decision and headed toward Princess Eliara's chambers. If he could reach Tala, she might help get word to the queen while he found somewhere to hide with the evidence. The storm struck without warning, a violent atmospheric disturbance that even Orion's sophisticated weather predictors failed to anticipate. Palace systems switched to emergency power as lightning struck repeatedly at the environmental shields protecting the structure. Kair realized with growing horror that this was no coincidence. The timing aligned too perfectly with Mervin's accelerated plans. The Vraks weren't waiting for more concessions. They were attacking now, using the storm as cover. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with a palace guard. For a terrifying moment, Kair thought he'd been caught, but the guard merely shouted, "Technical staff to emergency stations," before continuing it past, clearly unaware that Kair was now being hunted. The alarm sounded. A security breach in the east wing. He ran toward the source, rounding a corner to find chaos. The massive window at the end of the corridor had shattered, the environmental field flickering as it struggled to contain the howling wind and snow. Through the breach came three massive figures, Vrax raiders, their 6 limbs moving with predatory grace as they advanced on the panicked palace staff. "Intruder alert! Royal quarters!" The guard's cry over the comm system turned Kair's blood cold. The east wing connected directly to the royal family's private chambers. Without thinking, he grabbed a maintenance pike from the wall, a simple tool used for manipulating high circuits, but its metal length would serve as a weapon. He'd never fought a Vrax, but as a frontier colonist, he'd learned to defend himself against various threats. The nearest guard lay dead, blue blood spreading across the white marble. Kair grabbed the guard's fallen blade, a curved sword of Orionian design. He'd had basic training with similar weapons during his colonial security rotations. The sounds of fighting echoed through the quarters as palace guards engaged the invaders. But Kair's thoughts were only of Eliara. If this was a coordinated attack rather than an opportunistic raid, he reached the princess's chambers to find the door sealed. "Eliara, Tala, it's Kair." The door slid open just enough for him to slip through before sealing again. Inside, Tala stood protectively near Eliara, a ceremonial spear in her hands. "Are you hurt?" Kair asked quickly, scanning them both. "We're unharmed," Tala answered, her voice steadier than her trembling hands. "The queen, she was coming to visit the princess when the alarm sounded. The guards directed her to the secure bunker, but we were ordered to stay here and seal the room." Kair handed Tala the communication device and data crystal he had stolen from Mervin's quarters. "Get these to the queen if you can. It's evidence of Mervin's treachery. He's working with the Vrax. This attack is his doing." Tala's eyes widened. "The secret passage behind the star panel," she said. "It leads to the old maintenance tunnels. We might reach the secure bunker that way." A crash against the door made them all jump. "That won't hold a determined Vrax," Kair said grimly. "We need to move now." Eliara stood frozen, her eyes wide with terror, her hands pressed against her ears, against the cacophony of alarms and distant fighting. "Eliara," Kair knelt before her, keeping his voice calm despite the urgency. "I know everything is very loud and scary right now. We need to go somewhere safer. Can you be brave for a little while?" The princess didn't respond, retreating further into herself as the sensory overwhelm intensified. Making a quick decision, Kair pulled the bubble maker from his pocket. "Watch the bubbles, Eliara. Just as the bubbles." He blew a stream of the iridescent spheres, which caught the emergency lighting in hypnotic patterns. Eliara's gaze fixed on them, her breathing slowing slightly. "Good. Now we're going to play a game called Shadow Walk. We stay quiet and follow the shadows, just like the night creatures in your storybooks. Can you do that?" A barely perceptible nod. "Tala, open the passage. I'll carry Eliara." Tala moved to a section of the wall decorated with constellation markers. She pressed a specific sequence, and a narrow doorway appeared. "It connects to the old maintenance tunnels, but the princess has never used it. She doesn't like confined spaces." Another crash against the main door, louder this time. Metal groaned as claws worked at the seam. "No choice," Kair said. He turned back to Eliara. "I'm going to carry you, and you're going to keep watching the bubbles. When it gets too much, squeeze my hand once for a little scared, twice for very scared. Understand?" Another small nod. Kair lifted her, settling her against his hip with one arm while keeping the bubble maker visible. "Lead the way, Tala." They slipped into the narrow passage just as the main door gave way with a screech of tearing metal. The service tunnel was dimly lit by emergency strips along the floor, barely illuminating the tight confines. Tala moved ahead with surprising speed for her age, while Kair followed, continuously producing bubbles that drifted lazily in the recycled air currents. Eliara's grip on his tunic tightened, but she remained focused on the floating spheres, occasionally squeezing his hand, once, then twice, then once again as they navigated the claustrophobic passageway. "You're doing wonderfully," Kair whispered encouragement, just like a shadow walker. They emerged into a larger maintenance tunnel that sloped downward toward the palace foundations. The sounds of fighting were muffled here, but a new alarm blared: environmental system failures in multiple sectors. "The secure bunker is 2 levels down," Tala explained, pointing to a utility ladder. "But with systems failing, we might be walking into a trap," Kair finished her thought, "or a tomb if life support is compromised." A decision had to be made quickly. The Queen would be in the bunker, assuming she'd reached it safely. Protocol demanded they bring the princess there as well, but instinct told Kair that something about this attack felt targeted, precise. "Has there ever been a Vrax breach of the palace before?" he asked Tala as they paused at a junction. "Never in living memory," she replied. "The environmental shields and guard posts have always been sufficient." Yet they knew exactly where to strike, exactly when a storm would mask their approach, Kair mused. "This isn't random." Elara tugged at his sleeve, surprising both adults. "The sharp-voiced man," she whispered. "He talked to the outsiders. I saw him at the Edge Garden when I was watching the ice beetles. He gave them something shiny." Kair and Tala exchanged alarmed glances. "If Mervyn has betrayed the Queen, the bunker could be compromised," Kair said. "We need somewhere else to hide until we can determine what's happening." "There is one place," Tala said hesitantly. "The old communication hub in the North Tower. It was abandoned when the systems were upgraded, but it still has independent power for emergency transmissions. Few remember it exists. Can you get us there?" Tala nodded, changing direction at the next junction. The maintenance tunnels grew narrower and showed signs of disuse. Dust on the floor, older light strips flickering unreliably. Eliara's breathing had quickened again, the confined space and uncertain situation overwhelming her despite the bubbles. She began to rock slightly in Kair's arms. "Almost there," he promised, though he had no idea if that was true. "You're being so brave, Eliara. Just a little longer." They emerged finally into a circular room filled with outdated communication equipment. Dusty screens lined the walls, and a central console rose from the floor like an ancient monolith. "The system should still work," Tala said, moving to the main panel. "If I can activate it, we can see what's happening in the rest of the palace and potentially send a distress signal to the provincial garrisons." While Tala worked, Kair set Eliara down on a cushioned operator's chair, continuing to produce bubbles that floated around the room, creating pools of reflected light on the dark consoles. "The sharp-voiced man doesn't like me," Eliara said suddenly, her voice small but clear. "He thinks I'm not a proper princess." "Advisor Mervyn is afraid of what he doesn't understand," Kair replied, kneeling to her level. "Some people fear differences instead of seeing their value." "Is he hurting Mother?" The directness of the question caught Kair off guard. How much did this child understand about the political machinations surrounding her? "I don't know," he answered honestly, "but your mother is very strong and very smart, and we're going to help her." "I have it," Tala called out as the screens flickered to life. Security feeds from throughout the palace appeared, revealing scenes of continuing conflict. Palace guards fought against Vrax intruders in several locations, but the pattern was strange. The fighting seemed concentrated away from the royal quarters and bunker area. There, Kair pointed to one screen showing the entrance to the secure bunker. Guards stood at attention outside, apparently unaware or unconcerned about the fighting elsewhere. "That doesn't look like a security crisis. Those guards are positioned for ceremony, not defense." "The council chamber," Tala gasped, pointing to another screen. There, Queen Lysara stood surrounded by Advisor Mervyn and several provincial lords. Though there was no audio, the Queen's posture conveyed anger and defiant. "Simem, it's a coup," Kair realized. "The Vrax attack is a diversion. Mervyn is using the chaos to force the Queen to abdicate or transfer power." "On what grounds?" Tala asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. "The princess's fitness to rule," Kair said grimly. "With the palace under attack, he could claim decisions must be made immediately for planetary security. If the Queen refuses, an unfortunate casualty of the Vrax incursion," Tala finished, her face pale. "And with the heir deemed unfit, emergency powers would transfer to the Council of Elders, which Mervyn effectively controls." Eliara had gone very still, watching the screens with intense focus. Mother is in danger because of me, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. No, Eliara, Kair said firmly. Your mother is in danger because Advisor Mervyn is greedy for power. This is not your fault. I need to help her. The princess stood, her small frame suddenly appearing more regal despite her simple clothes. I need to show them I'm not broken. Kair exchanged a look with Tala. Taking a 7-year-old child into the middle of a coup attempt was madness. But leaving the queen to face Mervyn's treachery alone wasn't an option either. If we can reach the service passage behind the council chamber, we might find a way to help without exposing the princess immediately, Tala suggested. There are observation ports built into the walls, remnants from more paranoid times. Is there a way to contact the queen directly? A private communication channel, Kair asked. Tala moved to another console. The royal family has emergency communicators keyed to their genetic signatures. If the queen is wearing hers, she input a complex sequence, broadcasting now on the secure frequency. Moments passed in tense silence. Then a small indicator illuminated. Connected, Tala whispered. Audio only, for her safety. Kair leaned toward the console. Your Majesty, this is Kair Veyron. We're in the old communication hub with Princess Eliara. We can see what's happening in the council chamber. Are you in immediate danger? A long pause followed. Then the queen's voice came through, barely audible, and clearly spoken in a way to avoid detection. Mervyn has provincial lord's support, claims emergency powers necessary due to Vrak's threat and princess's incapacity. Ultimatum to sign abdication by planetary midnight or face removal by force. Bunker compromised. Guards divided in loyalty. We'll find a way to help, Kair promised. Stay safe. We'll contact you again soon. He signaled Tala to end the transmission before it could be traced. What can we do? Tala asked, fear evident in her voice. We are but 2 against Mervyn's conspirators. 3, Eliara corrected, her chin raised in a gesture reminiscent of her mother. I'm a princess of Orion. Kair looked at the small, determined figure and felt a surge of protective pride. Yes, you are. And it's time everyone remembered that. They moved through the service tunnels with renewed purpose, Tala leading them through the labyrinthine passages toward the council chamber. Eliara walked on her own now, one hand clutching Kair's, the other holding the bubble maker like a talisman. The observation port is just ahead, Tala whispered as they reached a narrow corridor that ran behind the council chamber's ornate walls. But we must be absolutely silent. The ports were designed to be undetectable from within the chamber, but sound can still carry. They crept forward until they reached a small panel. Tala pressed her palm against it, and a section slid silently aside, revealing a narrow viewing slit. Through it, they could see the council chamber and hear the heated discussion within. The Vrak's attack proves our vulnerability, Advisor Mervyn was saying to the assembled provincial lords. We cannot afford divided leadership in this crisis. With respect, Your Majesty, your focus on the princess has distracted you from the greater threats to our world. Queen Lysara stood regally despite being effectively surrounded. How convenient that these Vraks managed to breach our defenses precisely when you had gathered the provincial lords for this emergency session, Advisor. Are you accusing me of something, Your Majesty? Mervyn's tone was dangerous. I am stating facts, Lysara replied coldly. The Vraks have never breached the palace defenses, yet today, during a council meeting you assisted was urgent. They somehow disabled our security systems in a precision strike. Murmurs ran through the gathered lords. Paranoid deflections, Mervyn dismissed with a wave. The simple truth is that our defenses have weakened under your rule, as you've diverted resources to coddling an heir who will never be fit to govern. The human technician has filled your head with off-world nonsense about different abilities when what Orion needs is strength. The queen's eyes narrowed. Is that what this is about, Mervyn? Your disapproval of my daughter's caretaker? It is about the future of our world. Mervyn's voice rose. The Princess Eliara cannot even attend a simple court function without retreating in distress. How will she lead armies against the Vraks? How will she maintain the respect of the provincial lords? How will she ensure our survival on this unforgiving world? From their hiding place, Kair felt Eliara's grip tighten on his hand. To his surprise, Instead of showing distress at hearing herself discussed this way, her expression became more determined. What do they fear most? She whispered to Kair, so quietly he barely heard. Understanding her question, he whispered back, they fear what they don't understand. They fear you're not strong enough because they measure strength by their standards, not yours. Eliara nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Tala. Is there a way into the chamber from here? A door they won't expect? Tala looked alarmed. Princess, you can't mean to. I am the heir to Orion, Eliara said with quiet dignity. I should be in that room. Kair studied her face, seeing not panic but resolve. In the weeks he'd worked with her, he'd learned to recognize when she was pushing her boundaries by choice versus when she was overwhelmed. This was the former. There is an entrance, Tala admitted reluctantly. It was created as an escape route for royalty if the main doors were compromised. But Princess, the stimulation in that room, the voices, the tensions, it could trigger an episode. I have my bubbles, Eliara said simply, holding up the device. And I have Kair and you. I'm still afraid, but Mother needs me to be brave now. Kair knelt before her. Are you certain, Eliara? No one would think less of you for staying safe. I would, she replied with surprising clarity. The sharp-voiced man thinks I'm weak, but being different isn't being weak. You taught me that. Pride swelled in Kair's chest. Then we'll be right beside you. Tala led them further along the passage to a concealed panel. This opens directly behind the royal dais. It hasn't been used in generations, but the mechanism should still work. Inside the council chamber, Mervin's ultimatum reached its crescendo. The document before you is straightforward, Your Majesty. Abdicate in favor of a regency council until a suitable heir can be established. You will retain your title and comforts, but governance will pass to those better suited to the challenges we face. And if I refuse, Queen Lysara's voice was ice, then with great regret, the provincial lords will be forced to declare you unfit due to maternal bias clouding your judgment. The outcome is the same, but the process would be less dignified. As Mervin spoke, Tala activated the hidden door mechanism. With a barely audible click, a section of the ornate wall paneling behind the royal dais began to slide open. The movement caught the attention of those nearest the dais. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as heads turned toward the unexpected disturbance. Queen Lysara herself turned, her composed expression giving way to momentary shock as Princess Eliara stepped through the opening, followed by Kair and Tala. The princess! Someone gasped. Eliara stood still for a moment, visibly gathering her courage as the room's overwhelming stimuli hit her. The bright ceremonial lights, the many eyes fixed upon her, the tension-filled atmosphere. Her hand gripped Kair's tightly, but she didn't retreat. Mother, she said, her voice small but clear in the suddenly silent chamber, I came to help you. Queen Lysara recovered quickly, moving to stand protectively beside her daughter. Eliara, you should not be here. It isn't safe. I know, the princess replied, but the sharp-voiced man is saying untrue things about me, about us. Advisor Mervin's face darkened with fury. This charade is precisely what I was speaking of. Bringing a child into matters of state, and with that human manipulator beside her no less. I came because I wanted to. Eliara contradicted him directly, raising her voice slightly despite her obvious discomfort with the sound. Kair taught me that I can be brave even when things are loud and bright and scary. She lifted the bubble maker to her lips and blew gently. Iridescent spheres drifted upward, catching the ceremonial lights and casting rainbow reflections across the stunned faces of the provincial lords. The bubbles help me think when everything is too much, she explained, watching their floating journey. Everyone has something that helps them think better. This is mine. The simple dignity of her explanation created a moment of unexpected silence. Several of the lords exchanged uncertain glances. In that brief window of opportunity, Kair stepped forward, pulling the stolen communication device from his pocket. While the princess shows courage, Advisor Mervin shows treachery. He held up the device. This was found hidden in the advisor's private quarters. It's a modified communicator designed to contact the Vrax without detection by palace security systems. Mervin lunged forward. Lies! He plants evidence to divert attention from his own suspicious activities. I saw you, Eliara said suddenly, her voice stronger than before. At the Edge Garden, you gave the six-armed people a shiny thing and told them which wall was weakest. The specific details of her observation landed with unmistakable authenticity. Lord Dravek, the eldest provincial lord, stepped forward with a grave expression. The princess speaks of details only a witness could know, he said slowly, and the human technician presents physical evidence. This requires explanation, Advisor Mervyn. Mervyn's composure cracked. His hand moved to his belt, drawing a ceremonial blade. This farce has gone on long enough. With startling speed, he lunged not toward Kair or the Queen, but toward Princess Eliara. If the defective heir is removed, the succession crisis resolves itself. Several things happened at once. Queen Lysara threw herself toward her daughter. Kair intercepted Mervyn's charge, deflecting the blade with the stolen Vrax communicator, which shattered on impact. And Princess Eliara, rather than cowering or freezing, blew a stream of bubbles directly into Mervyn's face. The unexpected action, so incongruous with the violence of the moment, caused Mervyn to falter just long enough for palace guards loyal to the Queen to seize him. His blade clattered to the floor as he was forced to his knees. Treason against the royal line, Queen Lysara's voice rang with cold fury. Conspiracy with enemies of Orion. Attempted murder of the heir. The penalties for any one of these would be severe. For all three together. The chamber had descended into chaos. Provincial lords who had supported Mervyn now backed away, disavowing any knowledge of his plans. Others called for immediate execution. Through it all, Princess Eliara remained surprisingly calm, continuing to create bubbles that floated serenely above the tumult. "Stop," she said finally, her voice somehow cutting through the noise. "Everyone stop shouting. It hurts my ears, and I can't think when everyone shouts." Remarkably, the chamber quieted. The child who had been dismissed as incapable now commanded attention through the simple dignity of her request. "Advisor Mervyn did bad things," Eliara continued once she could be heard. "But killing him won't fix what's broken. The Vrax are still attacking. We should focus on protecting our people first." Queen Lysara looked at her daughter with newfound respect. "The princess speaks wisdom. Guards, take Advisor Mervyn and his known conspirators to the secure cells. We will deal with their punishment once the current crisis is contained." As Mervyn was dragged away, shouting threats and accusations, the Queen turned to the remaining provincial lords. "The princess has shown more courage and clarity today than many who doubted her. I trust this settles the question of her fitness as heir." Lord Dravek, who had remained neutral throughout the conspiracy, stepped forward and bowed deeply to Eliara. "The princess has demonstrated a unique perspective that may serve Orion well in the future. Different, perhaps, but not lesser." The other lords, reading the shifting political winds, quickly followed suit with their own acknowledgments. Eliara accepted their respects with surprising composure, though Kair could see the subtle signs of her growing overwhelm, the slight rocking motion, the tightening grip on her bubble maker. "Your Majesty," he said quietly to the Queen, "the princess has been extraordinarily brave, but this environment is becoming too much for her." Lysara nodded understanding. "Lords of the provinces, we must now address the Vrax incursion. I suggest we adjourn to the war room for strategic planning. Tala will escort the princess to her chambers to rest after her ordeal." As the chamber began to clear, the Queen knelt before her daughter. "Eliara, what you did today was incredible. You showed everyone that your different way of seeing the world is valuable." "I was very scared," Eliara admitted. "But you needed me." "Yes," the Queen agreed, her voice thick with emotion. "I did need you, more than I realized." She looked up at Kair, who continued creating bubbles to help Eliara regulate her overwhelmed senses. "And it seems I needed you as well, technician. Though perhaps technician no longer adequately describes your role here." In the days that followed, order was restored to the palace. The Vrax attack was repelled, with those not captured retreating back to the wilderness. Advisor Mervyn's interrogation revealed the extent of his treachery. He had indeed conspired with a Vrax splinter faction, promising them access to Orionian technology in exchange for creating the chaos needed to facilitate his power grab. Queen Lysara addressed the full court, with Princess Eliara at her side. The princess wore specially designed attire that reduced sensory discomfort while maintaining royal dignity, and small sound-dampening devices disguised as ceremonial ear cuffs helped filter the chamber's echoing acoustics. The events of recent days have taught us much about strength, the Queen declared to the assembled court. True strength lies not in conformity, but in adaptation, not in fear of difference, but in embracing the unique perspectives that difference provides. She gestured to her daughter, who stood calmly, occasionally releasing a bubble from a more elegant version of Kair's original device, now incorporated into her royal scepter. Princess Eliara sees patterns others miss, perceives details others overlook. These abilities will make her not just an adequate ruler when her time comes, but an exceptional one. The Queen then turned to where Kair stood at the side of the chamber. Kair Veyron, approach. Kair moved forward, keenly aware of the hundreds of eyes following his progress across the polished floor. Your contract as a technician expires in 3 days, Queen Lysara stated formally. However, I am offering you a new position, Royal Advisor on Human Integration and Special Education. Orion has long maintained minimal contact with human colonies, but perhaps that isolation has cost us valuable perspectives. Will you accept? The offer stunned Kair. He had expected, at most, an extension of his technical contract. To be offered a position of such influence. I would be honored, Your Majesty, he replied with a bow, though I should warn you that I often find myself questioning traditions. Good, the Queen said with the hint of a smile. We could use more questioning and fewer conspiracies. Princess Eliara stepped forward then, breaking protocol to speak directly. Kair taught me that my differences are strengths. I want to help other children like me find their strengths too. And so you shall, her mother promised. Together, we will establish a Royal Academy for Diverse Minds, where children with unique perspectives can learn to harness their gifts rather than hide them. As the court session concluded, Kair found himself standing beside the royal dais, watching as Princess Eliara confidently received the formal respects of the provincial lords, the same men who days earlier had questioned her fitness to rule. She still released an occasional bubble when the stimulation threatened to become too much, but she faced each interaction with growing assurance. She's remarkable, Kair said quietly to Queen Lysara, who had moved to stand beside him. Yes, the Queen agreed, though I needed someone to help me see it. She turned to face him directly. You blew bubbles to calm my daughter, not knowing I was watching. A simple act of kindness that may have saved our world from civil war. I just saw a child in need, Kair replied honestly. And I saw only a princess who didn't fit my expectations, Lysara acknowledged. Thank you for teaching us both to see differently. As if sensing their conversation, Eliara looked over and released a stream of bubbles in their direction. The iridescent spheres caught the light as they drifted upward through the grand chamber, transforming the formal court setting into something more inclusive, a place where differences were not just tolerated but celebrated. Beyond the walls of the palace, the harsh winter of Orion continued unabated. The Vraks who had escaped capture returned to their nomadic tribes with tales of the Blue Princess, whose strange powers had foiled their attack. In the coming months, the legend would grow among the six-limbed predators. A warning passed from pack to pack. Beware the human who serves the Bubble Princess. Together they see what cannot be seen, know what cannot be known. And in a small workshop adjacent to Princess Eliara's chambers, Kair continued to refine his bubble-making devices, creating versions for other children across Orion who experienced the world differently. Each bubble that rose from these devices carried within it a simple message, that sometimes the most profound strengths come disguised as differences, and sometimes the most important revolutions begin with nothing more complex than bubbles of hope.